We're here. We're back. It's 1 o'clock in the morning, Sunday morning, here in semi-sunny California. It was pretty nice today, all things considered. A little sprinkle here and there, but nothing to complain about in winter, especially not when our East Coast friends are being whammed with all kinds of nasty, horrible weather. And doubtless dozens of other countries all over the world. Don't mean to suggest that it's only the United States getting bad weather. Anyway, hello, good evening, good morning, wherever you may happen to be. Good afternoon, if that's what you're doing today at the moment. I'm Tad. I'm going to be reading in just a few minutes, and we are reading still from first Otherland book, City of Gold and Shadow. We're about a third of the way through, I'd say, which is pretty good for a big, long book. And don't have much to discuss today, really, that I didn't already talk about last week because I'm still doing all the same things. Well, no, that's not strictly true. Since last week, I received the copy-edited manuscript of Into the Narrow Dark, which I'm sure you all know by now is the third of what is now four-volume story. So I had to put aside volume 4, volume last, I hasten to emphasize. I had to put aside volume last so that I could work on. Hang on just a sec. Okay. So that I could work on the manuscript, which has come back to me in copy edited form, which means that my copy editor and friend, Mary Lou Cape Platt, has finished her pass through the manuscript and, as usual, has made all kinds of little notes like, I don't remember this, what's going on, and things like that. Usually quite justified. Every now and then I'll go, well, yeah, it's because you haven't lived with these fantasy books for your whole life like most of the readers have. But generally, though, she's absolutely right on and very good. And also a good reader that is always pleasing when you do something and she goes, oh, I love this bit or something. So that's what I'm working on right now, working on Into the Narrow Dark. At the same time, helping to prep the maps for that book. And also, doing my thinking exercises with the finish, not into the narrow dark, but the Navigator's Children, which is now the name of the very last volume, the fourth volume. So that's what I'm working on at the moment. Other than that, we are now, I think, all of us boosted. Yes, our eldest child got out of the house and went and got his booster. So we were all boosted and still hunkered down and dealing with all kinds of household stuff. Like we just found out we basically have to rip out our entire bathroom. One of our bathrooms, our main upstairs bathroom, because it's apparently got asbestos in it. The joys of being a homeowner. But, it's our house. We got to take care of it. So we're working on that and various plumbing issues and, all the stuff you have to deal with if you own a house. And meanwhile, trying to keep everybody happy and fed and all that stuff. And my wife and I are beginning to have these kind of weird conversations about maybe it's time to get a new dog. Because we haven't had only two dogs for like 15 years or something like that. No, longer than that now, 20 years. And we're I don't want to say down to two because it sounds like it's some kind of a renewable resource, and you just sink a dog mine in the backyard and bring up another one or dig a dog well or something. It's not that kind of a thing, but we are used to having a fairly large pack of dogs. So hasten to say nothing by any means, to say we're definitely going to do it. But for the first time, we're actually sort of talking about maybe we should get another dog to add to our merry mixture. So anything else of interest? Not really. As I said in my thing mentioning that I was reading tonight, I'm very happy that I'm finally through the holiday season. I can concentrate on all the other things that I have to do, which is what I intend to do. And yeah, so not a whole lot. So let me say hello to everybody because I screwed that up last time. Not for you guys, I think, but for the Sunday evening crowd. So let me make sure I say hello to everybody tonight. So Wouter, hello, good evening to you, and good evening to Iris as well. Good. I'm glad you're enjoying the book. Thank you for telling me. Hello, Ilva, darling. How you doing? Oh my God, no, I did miss your post on having cut off your fingertip. Don't do that. Don't do that. God, sorry to hear it. I hope you're feeling better. I don't have time to read this whole thing right now, but I will read it later on. So, God, and then what happened to? Why is it taking? Oh my Lord, why does this thing keep happening with the comments here? I just don't get it. It's totally bizarre. All right, no, that's not what I want to fix. Remove module. Get out of town. Anyway, so let me say hello to some other people before they take away all the other comments, which is what they seem to be doing. Kristen, hello. Good to see you. Ver. Hello, Ver, from checking in from Germany. Well, thank you very much. What a pleasure. Thanks for letting me know, and thanks for joining us. Christine, hello. Hello, good to see you. I'm glad you're here too. Chris Fab, hello, sir. Chris Fab, probably it would be pronounced since I believe Chris is German. Mark, hello, cold and sunny Yorkshire. Well, lovely to see you. I'm not shocked it's cold in Yorkshire because it quite often is. Jeremy, hello. Hello, hello. Good to see you, buddy. Anamika, nice to see you too. And Holger, I think I already said hello to you, but if I didn't, no, I said hello to Wouter already. Holger, I haven't said hello to yet. So hello, hello, hello. Yes, Ilva, by the way, I just read your comment about copy edits. Yes, we do need to finish the appendix fairly soon, but we still have a couple of maps and stuff to draw. So I don't think we're like in the next couple days or anything. Petra, hello, good to see you. And Christina, I already said hello, but I say hello again anyway. Have I gotten everybody here? There is my dear mother-in-law. Hello, Hazel. Hi, hi, hi. Your daughter is sleeping the sleep of the just because she's been doing a lot of work lately on a lot of different things. So she is, as usual, she's been asleep for hours. We're almost, it's so funny. The kids in this household are like stay up till 5 in the morning, sleep until like 3 or 4 in the afternoon. Deb's the complete opposite. Deb gets up at like 6 o'clock in the morning and falls asleep like between 9 and 10 most nights. And I kind of straddle between the two. I'm up till about 3 and I sleep till about 10:30 or so. So it's a very weird household. It's hard to get a quorum at any one time. But anyway, so that's just an update from my mother-in-law. Hi, sweetie. And anybody else? Ron, hello, Ron. Good to see you. Good, I'm glad you got the email. Let me check. Jessica, hello, hello. Good to see you too. I don't have any similar tales of woe like Ilva, who apparently attacked her own finger most brutally. I did get bit by a tick tonight after taking the dogs out for a walk. And from few minutes there, I thought I was going to have to cancel because some of you may remember I had a tick bite back like months and months and months ago, probably a year ago or more now. But it was on the night of a reading, as I recall. And I just got this massive allergic reaction, which I've never had. And God knows I've been bitten by a lot of ticks since we live, on a grassy hillside surrounded by trees and plants and we have animals. But that had never happened to me before. And then tonight I was coming in with the dogs and doing things, and I looked down and there's this nasty dog tick sitting on my wrist, and I removed it. But immediately it began to swell and feel really wretched, and I was going, oh God, not again. Oh, I don't want this to happen. But fortunately, it doesn't seem to have been like last time. That was really strange because I'm not allergic to anything as far as I know, but I was definitely allergic to that tick. My wrist doesn't feel great, but it ain't bad. And I'm certainly in better shape than it sounds like you are, Ilva. Don't do that anymore. Okay? Important tad is, order, command, whatever. Do not cut off parts of yourself. I forbid it. Okay. Anyway, let us start reading. And what you may have heard or not heard, depending on where you are in the story, is last Sunday evening, I read the chapter where we discovered, well, it never said explicitly, but it's pretty obvious that somehow Paul Jonas, the one who escaped the First World War, etc., doesn't really know what's going on. Paul Jonas found himself in a new country, which basically seems very much like Lewis Carroll's Through the Looking Glass, including a couple of sinister characters who remind us of the other sinister characters Paul had already met, which is Finch and Mullet, except these two were a walrus and a carpenter. And Paul, along with a young man named Galley that he met, the spit boy, spit boy at the local tavern, went to go see the bishop, a thinly veiled Humpty Dumpty allegory, and came back to find all of the other Oyster House kids had been murdered by the bad guys. That was the end of that chapter. So now we are starting a new chapter, and this one is called Eland's Daughter's Son. I think you can read that there. Those of you who, I'm sure most of you, because you're all such clever people, most of you know what an eland is. It's a kind of African antelope, a rather large antelope, and therefore very, very important to Bushman culture. For all I know, I'm just saying something that is going to be then repeated within this chapter. I wrote it a long time ago. I can't remember. Anyway, chapter 13, Eland's Daughter's Son. Netfeed Interactives, IEN Hour 4, Europe, North America, Backstab. Visual, Kennedy running across a state garden, pursued by tornado. Voiceover, Staback, Carolus Kennedy, and Sheena, Wendy O'Hara, again try to escape the fortress estate of the mysterious Dr. Methuselah, Moishi Reiner. Jeffries, 6 other supporting characters open, Flack 2, ien.backstab.cast. Someone at the door downstairs. Long Joseph stood nervously in the doorway of her room, unwilling to enter the proximity of illness, even something as unlikely to be contagious as what he had been told was a breakdown due to stress. He says he named Gabo or something. It's Cabo, my friend from the Polly. You can let him in. He stared for a moment, frowning, then turned and trudged away. He was clearly not happy about answering the door or taking messages for her, but in his own way, he was doing his best. Renee sighed. In any case, she couldn't summon up the energy to be angry. Suspicious and bad-tempered was just her father's way. To his credit, in the days she'd been home, he hadn't expected her to get up and fix meals either. Of course, his own contribution to the household hadn't grown much. They were both eating a lot of cold cereal and waved menu boxes. She heard the front door opening. She struggled upright in the bed and drank some water, then tried to fluff herself into some appearance of normality. Even if you'd almost died, it was embarrassing to have bed hair. Unlike her father, the Bushman came into the sick room with no hesitation. He stopped a few feet away from her, which she guessed was more from some strange sort of respect than anything else. Renee reached out her hand to draw him closer. His fingers were warm and reassuring. I'm very happy to see you, Renee. I have been worrying about you. I'm doing pretty well, actually. She squeezed his hand and released him, then looked around for something for Kabu to sit on. The only chair was covered with clothes, but he seemed content to stand. I had to fight like hell to get them to send me home from the emergency room, But if I'd gone into hospital, I would have been stuck in quarantine for weeks. She would also have been close to Stephen, but she knew that would have been a bittersweet proximity at best. You are best at home, I think. He smiled. I know that amazing things can be done in a modern hospital, but I am still one of my people. I would become even more sick if I had to stay in such a place. Rini looked up. Her father was back in the doorway, staring at Kabu. Long Joseph had a very strange expression on his face. When he saw Rini, it changed to something like embarrassment. I'm going over to see Walter. He showed her his hat as proof. He took a few steps away, then turned. You be all right? I'm not going to die while you're gone, if that's what you mean. She saw the closing up of his face and regretted her words. I'll be fine, Papa. Don't you and Walter drink too much. Her father had been looking at Kabu again, but he scowled at Rini. It was not particularly unpleasant, more of a general-purpose scowl. Don't you worry about what I'm getting up to, girl. Kabu was still standing patiently when the door closed behind Long Joseph, eyes bright in his small, solemn face. Rini patted the edge of the bed. Please sit down. You're making me nervous. I'm sorry we couldn't talk before, but the drugs I've been taking make me sleep a lot. But you're better now? He scrutinized her face. You look healthy in your spirit to me. When we first came back from that place, I was very frightened for you. It was an arrhythmia, not really a full-fledged heart attack. In fact, I'm feeling enough better that I'm beginning to get really angry. I saw them, Kabu, the bastards who run that place. I saw what they do in that club. I still don't have the slightest idea why, but if we weren't both this close, she held up her fingers, to having the same thing happen as Stephen and who knows how many others, I'll eat my hat. Kabu stared at her, confused. Rini laughed. Sorry, that's an expression. That means I'm certain I'm right. Haven't you heard it before? The bushman shook his head. No, but I am learning more all the time. Learning to think, almost, in this language. Sometimes I wonder what I am losing. He finally sat down. He was so light, Rini barely felt the mattress give. What do we do now, Rini? If what you say is true, these are bad people doing very bad things. Do we tell the police or the government? That's one of the reasons I wanted to see you, to show you something. She reached down behind her pillows, feeling for her pad. It took her some moments to pull it from the gap between the mattress and the wall where it had been wedged. She was dismayed by how weak she still felt. Even the small effort made her feel short of breath. Did you bring the goggles? It's so much slower trying to work on a flat screen. Kabu produced the cases stamped with the Polytechnic's logo. Rini took out both sets, neither much larger than a pair of sunglasses, found a Y connector in the tangle of cables beside her, and jacked both the goggle cable and a pair of squeezers into her pad. When she handed one pair of goggles to Kabu, he did not immediately take them. What's wrong? He shook his head slowly. I was lost, Rini. I failed you when we were in that place. We're not going anywhere near there. Besides, this is just optical display and sound anyway, not full wraparound. We're just going to go visit the Poly's infobanks and a few other subnets. There's nothing to be afraid of. It is not so much fear that holds me back, although I would be a liar if I said I was not frightened. But there is more. There are things I need to tell you, Rini. Things about what happened to me in that place. She paused, not wanting to push him. Despite his facility, she reminded herself, he was still very new to this, new to everything she took for granted. I have things I need to show you too. I promise you it will be no worse than working in the lab at school. Afterward, I very much want to hear what you have to say. She offered the goggles again, and this time Kabu accepted them. The empty gray quickly became the ordered polygons of her personal system, a simple array resembling a home office, far less sophisticated than what she had available at the Poly. She had customized it with a few pictures on the wall and a tank of tropical fish, but otherwise it was a coldly functional environment, a system for someone who was always in a hurry. She couldn't see herself changing it any time soon. We were in that place for, 3 hours? 4? As she palpated the squeezers, one of the polygons became a window. After a moment, the Polytechnic's logo and advisory warning appeared. Rini keyed in her access code, and immediately the library environment sprang into detailed existence. Bear with me, she said. I'm used to doing my work here with some kind of freehand capabilities, but today we are stuck with these squeezer things, which are pretty basic. It was strange to be moving through such a familiar and realistic environment, but not being able to react directly to anything. When she wanted to manipulate one of the symbolic objects, instead of just reaching out toward it, she had to think about the quite different things needed to key in a direction. This is what I wanted to see, she said when she'd finally opened the information window she wanted. The Poly's records for that day. Lines of numbers rolled rapidly upward in front of them. Here's the harness room prefix. All the connections. There we are, signing in. That's my access code, right? I see it. Kabu's voice was steady, but distant. Well, scan this. That's our usage record. No connection except to the in-house school system. I don't understand. It means that, according to this, we never logged into the net, never entered the commercial node called Mr. J's at all. Everything we experienced, the pool, that sea monster, that huge main room, none of it happened. That's what the Poly's records say anyway. I am confused, Rini. Perhaps I am still not as wise about these things as I believed myself to be. How could there be no record? I don't know. Rini played the squeezers. Inside the goggle universe, the Poly's records disappeared, and another window opened up. Look at this. My own personal accounts, even the ones I set up just for this, are zeroed. None of the connection time was charged to me, to the school, anywhere. There's not a single record of what we did, nothing. She took a breath, reminding herself to stay calm. She still got a little dizzy now and then, but was feeling stronger every day, which made the whole thing even more frustrating. If we can't find the records, we can't very well make a complaint, can we? You can just imagine what the reaction of the authorities would be. That's a very serious charge, Ms. Surawayo, especially since you've apparently never used the node in question. It would be useless. I wish I could make some suggestion, Rini. I wish there was some help I could give, but this is beyond my very young knowledge. You can help. You can help me try to find out what happened. I don't have much stamina and I get tired if I have to stare at anything too long, but if you can be my eyes, we can try a few things I haven't had a chance to do yet. I am not giving up that easily. Those bastards have hurt my brother, and they damn near got you and me too. Rini was leaning back against the pillows. She'd taken her medicine, and as usual, it was making her sleepy. Kabu was sitting cross-legged on the floor, his eyes hidden by the goggles, his fingers moving with surprising fluency on the squeezer keys. There is nothing like what you describe, he said, breaking a long silence. No loops, no repetitions. All the loose ends are, as you would say, tied up. Shit. She closed her eyes again, trying to think of another way through the problem. Someone had wiped out all record of what she and Kabu had done, then fabricated a new one and inserted it seamlessly into place. The time they had spent in the club, all of it, was now as insubstantial and unprovable as a dream. The thing that frightens me is not just that they've managed to do that, but the fact that they tracked back all my aliases and wiped them too. There shouldn't be any way in hell they could do that. Kabu was still moving through the data world. The goggles looked like insect eyes on his narrow face. But if they have found these false selves you constructed, can they not trace them back to you? Yesterday I would have said not in a million years, but suddenly I'm not so sure. If they know it was someone at the Poly, they wouldn't have much trouble narrowing it down without even getting into internal records. She bit her lip, wondering. It was not a pleasant thought. She somehow doubted that the people who ran Mr. J's would limit themselves to the kind of intimidation that came in a solicitor's letter. I kept him as far from me as I could when I was setting up the aliases. Went in through public nodes, everything I could think of. I never believed they could track me straight back to the Poly. Kabu made a sudden noise, a small click of surprise. Rini sat up. What? There is something. He paused, and his fingers moved swiftly. There is something here. What does it mean when an orange light flashes in your office? It is blinking like a lightning beetle. It just began. That's the antivirus kicking in. Rini leaned over, ignoring the moment of lightheadedness, and picked the other pair of goggles up from the floor. She pulled the Y connector tight between her and Kabu. Someone's trying to get into my system, maybe? A shiver of unease moved through her. Had they tracked her already? Who were these people? She was in the system's basic VR representation again, the three-dimensional office. A small vermilion dot was blinking on and off, a smoldering glow like a coal from a braai. She leaned and groped blindly across Kabu's knee, then tapped a couple of keys. Inside the virtual space, the dot of light exploded into a welter of symbols and text, which filled much of the office. Whatever it is, it's already in the system, but it's still dormant. Probably a virus. She was angry that her system had been penetrated and perhaps hopelessly corrupted, but at the same time it seemed an oddly muted response from the kind of people who owned such a club. She set her phage gear in search of the intruding code. It didn't have to hunt very long. What in hell? Kabu sensed her puzzlement. What is wrong, Rini? That's not supposed to be there. Hanging in virtual space before them, rendered much more realistically than the planar office furniture. The planar office furniture was a translucent, yellow-glinting, faceted object. It looks like a yellow diamond. An image as tenuous as a dream floated up to her. A pure white shape, an empty person made of light. Then it was gone again. Is it a computer sickness? Is it something those people have sent? I don't know. I think I recall something about it from just before we went offline, but it's all very confused. I don't remember much of what happened after I went back to the cave to get you. The yellow gem hung before her, staring back like an emotionless golden eye. I really must talk to you, Rini. Kabu sounded unhappy. I must tell you about what happened to me there. Not now. She quickly threw her analyticals at the gem, or at what the gem represented. When the results came back a few moments later, surrounding the foreign object like a system of tiny text planets orbiting a diamond-edged sun, she whistled between her teeth in surprise. It's code, but it's been compacted until it's as tight as a drum. There's an amazing amount of information packed in there. If it is some kind of destructive virus, it's got enough information to rewrite. It's got enough information to rewrite a system much bigger than mine. What are you going to do? Rini didn't answer him for several long moments as she hastily checked back through her earlier connections. Wherever it came from, it's attached itself to my system now. But I don't see any trace of it remaining on my part of the Polytechnic's net, which is just as well. God, the pad is bulging. I hardly have any memory left. She cut her connection to the school. I don't think I can even activate this thing on my little system here. So maybe it's effectively neutralized, although I can't imagine why someone would set up a virus that downloads itself to a system too small for it to operate. For that matter, I can't imagine why anyone would make a virus that big. It's like trying to use an elephant to do surveillance in a phone booth. She turned off her system and removed the goggles, then slumped back on her bed. Small spots of yellow light, like the diamond's smaller cousins, jittered before her eyes. Kabu took off his own goggles and looked at the pad with suspicion, as though something unpleasant might crawl out of it. He then turned his worried look onto her. You look pale. I will pour you some water. I have to find a system that's powerful enough to let the thing activate, Rini said, thinking out loud. But that's not connected to any other system. Something big and isolated, sterile. I could probably set that up in one of the labs at the Poly, but I'd have to answer a lot of questions. Kabu carefully handed her a glass. Should you not destroy it? If it is something that those people made, the people of that terrible place, it must be a dangerous thing. But if it came from the club, it's the only proof we've got that we were there. Even more important, it's code, and people who write high-level code have their own style, just like flick directors or artists. If we can figure out who writes the gear for Mr. J's dirty side, well, it's a place to start anyway. She drained the glass in 2 long swallows, amazed at how thirsty she was. I'm not going to give up just because they frightened me. She let herself slump back against the pillows. I'm not giving up. Kabu still sat cross-legged on the floor. So how will you do this if you do not use the school? He sounded almost mournful, far more so than was appropriate for what he'd said, as though he were making small talk while saying goodbye to someone he did not expect to see again. I'm thinking. I have a couple of ideas, but I need to let them cook. The bushman was quiet, staring at the floor. At last, he looked up. His eyes were troubled, his forehead wrinkled. Rini suddenly realized that quite uncharacteristic gloom had been hanging over him since he had arrived. You said you wanted to talk to me about what happened. He nodded his head. I am very confused, Rini, and I need to speak. You are my friend. You have saved my life, I think. And you saved mine, and I know that for certain. If you had waited too long before getting help for me, it was not hard to see that your spirit was very weak, that you were very ill. He shrugged as though embarrassed. So, talk to me. Tell me why your spirit is weak, if that's what is wrong." He nodded, his expression solemn. "Since we came back from that place, I do not hear the sun ringing. That is what my people say. When you can no longer hear the sound the sun makes, your spirit is in danger. I have felt that way many days now. First, I must tell you things about me you do not know. Some of the story that is my life. I told you that my father is dead, that my mother and my sisters live with my people. You know that I have been to city schools. I am of my people, but I also have the language, the ideas of city people. Sometimes those things feel a poison inside of me, something cold that might stop my heart." He stopped, drawing a deep, ragged breath. Whatever he was about to tell clearly pained him. Renee found that she was clenching her fists tightly, as though watching someone she loved perform a dangerous feat in a high place. "There are very few of my people left," he began. "The old blood is mostly gone. We have married the taller people, or sometimes our women have been taken against their wishes, but there are fewer and fewer who look like me. There are fewer still who live in the old way. Even those who are of the true Bushman kind, of the pure blood, are almost all raising sheep or working in cattle stations along the edges of the Kalahari or in the Okavango Delta. That was my mother's family, a Delta family. They had sheep, a few goats. They took fish from the Delta and traded in the nearest town for things that they felt they needed. Things our ancestors would have laughed at. How they would have laughed. Radios, sometimes. Someone even had an old television that worked on batteries. What are those things but the voices of the white man and the black man who lives like the white man? Our ancestors would not have understood. The voices of the city drown out the sounds of the life my people once lived, just as they make it hard to hear the ringing of the sun. So, my mother's family lived a life like many of Africa's poor black people, haunting the outside places of what had been their own lands. The whites do not rule in Africa now. At least they no longer sit in the offices of the government. But the things they brought here rule Africa in their place. This you know, even living in the city." Renee nodded. "I know. But there are still some of our people who live the old way, the way of the early races, the way of mantis and porcupine and Kwamanga, the rainbow. My father and his people lived this way. They were hunters, traveling in the desert where neither the white man nor the black man go, following the lightning, the rains, and the antelope herds. They still lived the life that my people have lived since the very first days of creation, but only because there is nothing the city folk want from the desert. I learned in school that there are still a few such places left in this world. A few places where no radios play, where no rolling wheels leave their tracks. But these places are shrinking away like water spilled on a flat rock that dries beneath the sun. But the only way my father's people could keep their life and hold on to the old ways was to stay far from everyone, even those of our blood who had left the desert and the sacred hills. Once all Africa was ours, and we roamed it with the other first peoples.
with the eland and the lion, the springbok and the baboon. We call baboons the people who sit on their heels, and all the others. But the remnants of our kind can live only by hiding. To them the city world is true poison. They cannot survive its touch. Many years ago, now before you or I were born, a terrible drought began. It hurt all the land, but most of all the dry places, the places where only my father's people lived. It lasted 3 full years. The great springbok herds deserted the land, the kudu and the hartebeest too. They all died or moved away, and my father's family suffered. Even the sipping wells, the places where only the bushmen can find water, ran dry. The old people had already given themselves up to the desert, that the younger ones might live. But now the young and strong were dying also. The children already born were weak and sickly, and no new children had come, since in a time of great drought our women are no longer fertile. My father was a hunter in the early prime of his life. He traveled far across the desert, walking for days in search of anything that might help keep his family, his brothers and sisters, nieces and nephews alive. But each time he went out, he had to go farther in search of game. And each time there was less food to keep him alive as he hunted. The ostrich shells in which my people carry water were always nearly empty. The other hunters had no better luck, and the women worked all day long every day, digging for any roots that might have survived the terrible drought, collecting what few insects remained so that the children would have something to eat. At night they all prayed that the rains would finally come back. They had no happiness. They did not sing, and after a while they did not even tell stories. The misery was so great that some of my father's family suspected that the rain had finally left the earth and gone away forever to some other place, that life itself was ending. One day, when my father was on a hunting trip and had already been away from his people for 7 days, he saw an impossible vision. A great eland, the most wonderful of all creatures, standing at the edge of a desert pan, nibbling at the bark of a thorn tree. An eland, he knew, would provide days of food for his family, and even the water in the grass remaining in its stomach would help to keep the children alive longer. But he knew it was also a strange thing to see this single, solitary beast. The eland does not travel in vast herds like the other antelope, but where he goes, his family goes, just as with our own people. Also, this eland was not sick. Its ribs did not show despite the terrible drought. My father could not help wondering if perhaps this animal was a special gift from Grandfather Mantis, who had made the very first eland from the leather of Kwamanga's sandal. As he wondered, the eland saw him and darted away. My father gave chase. All of one day he followed the eland, and when at last it stopped to rest, he crept as close as he could, then daubed an arrow with his strongest poison and let it fly. He saw the arrow strike before the eland ran away. When he went to the place it had been, the arrow was not there, so his heart was full. He had struck what he shot at. He began to track it, waiting for the poison to take effect. But the eland did not slow or show any sign of weakness. All the next day he tracked it, but never came close enough to shoot another arrow. The eland moved quickly. My father's ostrich shells were empty, and there was no more dried meat in his pack. But he had no time to search for water or hunt for food. 2 more days he tracked the animal across the sands by hot sun and cold moon. The eland ran ever southeast, toward the place where the desert ended in what had been a great swamp around a river delta. My father had never in his life been half so close to the Okavango. His people, who had once traveled 1,000 miles every season, now kept to the most inaccessible inner reaches of the desert for their own safety. But he had become a little mad with hunger and weariness and fear, or perhaps a spirit was in him. He was determined that he would catch the eland. He now felt sure that it was a gift from Mantis, and that if he brought it back to his people, the rains would come. At last, on the 4th day after he had shot at the eland, he stumbled across the fringes of the desert, through the hills into the outer edges of the Okavango swamp. But, of course, the swamp had also dried in the great drought, and so he found nothing but cracked mud and dead trees. But still he saw the eland running before him, as faint as a dream, and saw its track in the dust, so he went on. He walked all night through that unfamiliar place, the bones of crocodiles and fish showing white beneath the moon. My father's people lived in the old way. They knew every rock and mound of sand, every tree and thorn bush of the desert, in the way that city people know the habits of their children or the furnishings of their houses. But now he was in a place that he did not know, and chasing a great eland that he believed was a spirit. He was weak and afraid, but he was a hunter, and his people were in terrible need. He prayed to the grandmother stars for wisdom. When the morning star, who is the greatest hunter of all, at last appeared in the sky, my father prayed to him as well. "Make my heart as your heart," he asked the star. He was begging for the courage to survive, for he had grown very weak. As the sun rose up into the sky and began to burn the land again, my father saw the shape of the eland beside a stream of running water. The sight of so much water and the spirit beast so close at last made my father's head hurt, and so he fell to the ground. He crawled toward the eland, but his arms and legs grew weak, and he could not crawl any farther. But as his senses fled from him, he saw that the eland had become a beautiful girl, a girl of our people, but with an unfamiliar face. It was my mother, who had gotten up early in the morning to walk to the water. The drought meant that even the great river delta was nearly dry, and she and her family had to travel a long way from their tiny village beside the road to draw water. My mother saw this hunter come from the desert and fall down in a swoon at her feet, and she saw that he was dying. She gave him to drink. He emptied her jug, then nearly drank the little stream dry. When he could walk, she took him back to her family. The older ones still spoke his language. While my mother's parents fed him, the grandparents asked him many questions, clucking to themselves in wonder at seeing a man of their own early memories. He ate but did not say much. Although these people looked much like him, their ways were strange, but he hardly noticed what they did. He had eyes only for my mother. She, who had never seen a man of the old ways, had eyes only for him. He could not stay. He had lost the eland, but he would at least take water back to his family and people. He was also uneasy with the strangers, with their box that spoke, with their strange clothes and strange language. My mother, who did not like or respect her own father because he beat her, ran away with my father, preferring to go to his people than to remain with her own. Although he did not urge her to leave her family, he was very happy when she came with him, for she was beautiful in his eye from their first meeting. He called her Elan's daughter, and they laughed together, although at first they could not understand each other's speech. When at last, after a journey of many days, they found his people again, the rest of his family was amazed by his story and welcomed her and made much of her. That night, thunder rang out over the desert and lightning walked. The rains had come back. The drought was ended. Kabu fell silent. Rini waited as long as she could before speaking. And then what happened? He looked up, a small, sad smile playing about his lips. Am I not tiring you with this long story, Rini? It is only my story, the story of how I came to be and how I came here. Tiring me? It's wonderful, like a fairy tale. The smile flickered. I stopped because that was the happiest moment for them, I think, when the rains came. My father's family thought he had brought back the eland's daughter in truth, that he had brought luck back to them. But if I go on, the story grows more sad. If you want to tell me, I want to listen, Kabu. Please. So, he spread his hands. For a time after that, things were good. With the rain's return came the animals, and soon things were growing again. Trees were making new leaves. Flowers were springing up. Even the bees returned and began to make their wonderful honey and hide it away in the rocks. This was truly a sign that life was strong in that place. There is nothing the Bushmen like so much as honey, and that is why we love the little bird called the honey guide. So things were good. Soon after, my mother and father conceived a child. That was me, and they named me Kabu, which means dream. The Bushmen believe that life is a dream, which itself is dreaming us, and my parents wanted to mark the good fortune that the dream had sent them. Others in the family also bore children, so my first few years were spent among companions of my own age. Then a terrible thing happened. My father and his nephew were out hunting. It had been a successful day. They had killed a fine big hartebeest. They were happy because they knew that there would be a feast when they returned and that the meat would feed their families well for several days. On their way back, they came across a jeep. They had heard of such things but had never seen one before, and at first they were reluctant to go near it. But the men in it, 3 black men and 1 white, all tall, all dressed in city clothes, were clearly in danger. They had the look of people who would die soon if they did not get water, so my father and his nephew went to them and helped them. These men were desert scientists from one of the universities. I would guess that they were geologists searching for oil or something else of value to city people. Their jeep had been struck by lightning, so that both engine and radio were useless. Without help, they would doubtless have died. My father and his nephew led them to the outskirts of the desert to a small trading village. This they would not have dared to do, except that my father remembered that he had left the desert once before without harm. My father planned to take them to the edge of town and send them on their way, but as they all walked, very slowly, since that was as fast as the city folk could go, another jeep came. This one belonged to government rangers, and although they used their radio to summon help for the men my father had rescued, they also arrested my father and his nephew for having killed a hartebeest. The hartebeest, you see, is protected by the government. The bushman is not. The uncharacteristic bitterness in his words made Rini flinch. They arrested them after they just saved those men. That's horrible. Kabu nodded. The scientists argued against it, but the rangers were the kind of men who fear that they will get in trouble if they are seen to let some small thing pass. So they arrested my father and his relative and took them away. Just like that. They even took the hartebeest as evidence. By the time my father and his nephew reached the town, it was a rotting carcass, unfit to eat, and was thrown away. The scientists were so ashamed that they borrowed another vehicle and went to tell my father's people what had happened. They did not find them, but they found another group of bushmen, and soon my mother and the rest of the family heard what had happened. My mother, who, if she had not lived in the city world, at least knew something of it, determined that she would go and argue with the government, which she thought of as a wise man with a white beard in a big village, and tell them that they must let my father go. Although the rest of the family warned her not to do it, she took me and set out for the town. But, of course, my father had already been sent on to the city, far away, and by the time my mother could make her way there, he had already been convicted and sentenced for poaching. Both he and my cousin were put in prison, caged with men who had committed terrible crimes, who had shot their own families dead, had tortured and killed children or old people. Every day my mother went to beg for my father's freedom, taking me with her, and every day she was driven away from the court, and later the prison, with harsh words and blows. She found us a shack on the edge of the city, 2 walls of plywood and a piece of tin for a roof, and she scavenged in the rubbish heaps for food and clothing with the other poor people, determined that she would not leave until my father was free. And I think since we've got several more pages of that chapter, I'm going to have to stop there since we're almost at the top of the hour and my tick bite is making all of me itch all over, which I have been trying my best to hide. I hope you all didn't notice me squirming slightly. Anyway, so with that, I'm going to wrap it up because it is almost 2 o'clock. And as I said, there's quite a few more pages. I'd be at least another half an hour reading tonight. So I will finish that chapter off, I'm sure, during the 7 o'clock reading later today. Until those of you who are back for that one, or until you come back next week for the early Sunday morning reading, or whatever, if you're watching this online, that too. I want to thank you for joining me. Thank you for putting up with my undoubtedly somewhat strange attempts at a Southern African Bushman accent. But I just have always felt that these characters need to be acted out, and I couldn't see acting them out without something resembling their real voices. But anyway, that's beside the point. The point is, I want you all to take good care of yourselves and your loved ones and your friends and neighbors. And I will see some of you at 7 p.m. tonight. The rest of you, I hope I will see around and about the online campus, but also, if not that, then next Sunday at 1 a.m. my time when I return and we read more of Otherland. And until then, thank you so much for your kind attendance and all the other kind stuff, all the good vibes that you send my way, because I do appreciate them. And I do my best to send them back to you all, and just know that I'm thinking good thoughts about you. So, have a good night. Take care. Peace.